When I pointed out that our team was being overworked, my manager laughed and said, "If you can't handle the heat, there's the door." He leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Honestly, maybe you're just not cut out for high-stress jobs." I took a deep breath, updated my resume that night, and 2 weeks later, I walked into his office, not to apologize, but to give him my 2 weeks' notice. Hand-delivered by his boss, along with an offer for me to join a competitor. I work in tech. Project management, to be exact. Nothing fancy, but important enough to keep timelines straight and people from drowning in deadlines. I was working at a mid-sized firm in Dallas, Texas. We were contracted by some big companies and had a growing reputation. Everything looked fine on paper. But if you worked there, especially on my team, you'd know the truth: we were overworked, underpaid, and completely dismissed. It started slowly, like these things usually do. First it was a few late nights. Then weekends. Then we were expected to be on call basically all the time. My team, 5 of us, all solid people, were cracking. You could see it in their eyes. I wasn't just worried about morale. I was worried someone was going to burn out for real, or worse, quit without notice. Our manager, Brett, didn't care. Brett liked to hear himself talk. He wore flashy watches, took long lunches, and thought leadership meant barking orders and belittling people. He was the kind of guy who'd ask you for status updates while you were on PTO and then act confused when you didn't respond fast enough. Still, I tried to be fair. I gave him the benefit of the doubt more times than I should have. But the last straw came after a week where I personally worked 78 hours, yes, I counted, and saw one of my team members break down in tears after a call with a client that Brett shoved onto her last minute. So I asked for a private meeting. I wasn't rude. I wasn't emotional. I brought numbers. I showed him the hours logged. The tickets left open. The fact that 3 of our 5-person team had worked more than 60 hours the past week. I said something needed to change. Maybe shift some tasks. Maybe get temporary support. Or at the very least, acknowledge what was going on. He laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a polite one. A loud, mocking, full-on laugh like I'd told him a bad joke. "If you can't handle the heat," he said, leaning back in his overpriced leather chair, "there's the door." I blinked. I thought he was joking. But he wasn't done. "Honestly," he continued, crossing his arms, "maybe you're just not cut out for high-stress jobs. Some people just aren't." I stared at him. For a few seconds, I didn't say anything. I think part of me was waiting for him to take it back. To say he was kidding. But he didn't. He just looked at me with this smug grin like he'd won something. So I nodded. I said, "Got it." And I walked out of his office. That night, I updated my resume. I stayed up until 2 a.m. applying to jobs. I didn't whine. I didn't complain. I just got to work. The next morning, I started documenting everything. Every ridiculous task. Every overtime hour. Every Slack message where Brett dumped things on us with no warning. I didn't tell my team what I was doing. I didn't want to raise any flags. Within 4 days, I had 3 interviews lined up. Within a week, I had a serious offer. A better company. Better salary. And, here's the kicker, one of the execs used to work with my current company. Apparently, Brett had a reputation. 2 weeks after that meeting in Brett's office, I sent an email to our department VP, someone I'd only spoken to in passing but who I knew oversaw our team. I told him I had something urgent to discuss in person. He agreed to a 30-minute meeting the next morning. I came in with a folder. Inside it, a breakdown of the hours my team had worked over the past 60 days. Emails and messages from Brett. Specific incidents of disrespect and poor leadership. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I kept it factual. I told the VP I was leaving, but that I couldn't in good conscience leave without explaining why. He listened. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he thanked me, shook my hand, and said, "I'm very sorry you had to go through this." An hour later, Brett was called into the VP's office. Half an hour after that, Brett came storming out, red in the face. He didn't look at me. He went straight to his office and slammed the door. I wasn't supposed to know what happened in there, but another manager let it slip later. Brett was being put on a performance plan and had to report weekly to the VP directly. The next morning, I walked into Brett's office to give him my 2 weeks' notice, except I wasn't alone. The VP came with me. He stood behind me while I handed Brett the envelope. Brett opened it, looked confused, then pissed. "This is your resignation?" he asked, glaring at me. "Yes," I said. "And a formal offer from a competing firm. One that values its people." He looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. I turned and walked out. But that wasn't the end. The news spread fast. By the end of the day, the whole floor knew I was leaving. Some people congratulated me quietly. Others avoided eye contact, like they were scared of being next. Brett stayed holed up in his office most of the day, blinds closed. I thought that would be it. But Brett wasn't the type to take a hit quietly. 3 days after I gave my notice, weird things started happening. The guy from IT told me my network permissions were being reviewed. Suddenly I couldn't access certain files. Shared drives I'd built and maintained for 2 years? Gone. Meeting invites started disappearing from my calendar. When I asked Brett about it, he smirked and said it must be a glitch. Then, on the 5th day, I got called into HR. They said they'd received concerns about my behavior. That someone had reported I was sharing confidential information and trying to poach coworkers. I was stunned. I asked who said it. They wouldn't tell me. I asked for proof. They said they were just looking into it for now. I knew exactly who was behind it. I didn't say much in that meeting. Just nodded and left. But inside, I was fuming. I hadn't said a word to anyone about joining me at the new firm. I hadn't shared a single file that wasn't mine. Brett was trying to mess up my reputation on the way out. So I did what I always do when I get pissed off. I stayed calm and got to work. I contacted the new company I was joining and told them what was happening. They backed me completely. Told me not to worry. Said they'd seen this kind of thing before. Toxic managers trying to torch bridges after someone dared to leave on their own terms. Then I did something Brett didn't expect. I asked for a full copy of my email records and message logs under the company's data policy. Since I hadn't officially left yet, and I was still a full-time employee, they had to give it to me. I reviewed everything. Spent hours combing through every email, Slack message, file log. Not just mine, but the ones where Brett copied the wrong people, the ones where he badmouthed our team to clients, the ones where he flat out lied about progress and blamed others for his own mistakes. I organized it. Labeled it. Built a timeline. Then I wrote a report. 12 pages. Clean, factual, timestamped. I sent it to the VP, the head of HR, and the legal department. Subject line: formal response to false allegations and a request for investigation. Within 24 hours, HR scheduled a follow-up. The tone was very different this time. But Brett? Brett doubled down. That same afternoon, he tried calling me into a disciplinary meeting. Just him and me. No HR. No witnesses. I declined. Politely. Then I forwarded the meeting invite to HR and asked for clarification on whether I was being disciplined or retaliated against during my notice period. That night, the VP called me on my personal phone. "I wanted to let you know," he said, "you're not in any trouble. And I've escalated this. I'm sorry it got this far." Turns out, Brett had done this before. Not this exact thing, but similar stuff. Silencing employees. Covering his own failures. intimidating people who pushed back. But this time, there was proof. And someone willing to speak up. Me. HR called me the next day and told me I didn't have to come back in if I didn't want to. They'd pay out my final 2 weeks. My new company was thrilled. I started early. But I kept an eye on the fallout. 3 weeks later, I got a message from a former coworker: "Brett's gone. Not transferred. Not promoted. Fired." Apparently, the investigation found multiple violations of company policy. And because I'd documented everything, they had no way to spin it. He was walked out. No goodbye. No party. Just gone. But that wasn't the end either. So yeah, Brett got fired. And for a while, it felt like everything had settled. People reached out to thank me. Some said they wished they'd spoken up sooner. A few from my old team even ended up interviewing at my new company. One got hired a month later. But just when I thought Brett was out of my life, he came back, indirectly. I got a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't know. His name was Kyle, and he worked for another mid-sized tech company just outside Houston. Said he'd just started there and had questions about some past vendors. Nothing unusual. I responded politely. Then he followed up with this random question: "Did you ever work with a guy named Brett M?" My stomach dropped. I asked why. Kyle said Brett had just been hired as a consultant. Not full-time. A short-term contract to help with team restructuring. And that he'd name-dropped me in a meeting. Said I was one of his success stories. I was stunned. I told Kyle, carefully, that my experience with Brett had been complicated. That he wasn't someone I'd recommend. Kyle asked if I'd be willing to share more, off the record. I hesitated. I didn't want to seem like I was chasing after him. But at the same time, Brett using my name to build himself back up? That hit a nerve. So I told Kyle everything. Just the facts. He was shocked. Said Brett had presented himself like some kind of fixer. Claimed he turned around underperforming teams and improved morale. I nearly laughed out loud. A week later, Kyle reached out again. Said Brett had already pissed off a few team leads. Apparently, he gave a presentation where he criticized everyone's work ethic, compared them to his last team, and told a senior developer she should toughen up. He lasted 2 more weeks before they cut his contract. At that point, I figured it was over for good. But then my phone rang. From a blocked number. It was Brett. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. At first, he was calm. Too calm. "I just wanted to clear the air," he said. "We had our differences, but you didn't have to go nuclear." I didn't say much. Just listened. "You're not better than me," he said after a pause. "You think you won, but I've got contacts. I'll land on my feet. You're not the only one who can play this game." Then he hung up. I sat there for a second, staring at the screen. I knew right then, he wasn't done. A week later, a fake Glassdoor review showed up about me. Named me directly. Said I was toxic, disloyal, and had betrayed the company to climb the ladder. It was obvious who wrote it. The writing style, the phrasing, all Brett. I flagged it. Glassdoor took it down, but it rattled me. Then my new company's HR got an anonymous email claiming I had violated confidentiality agreements and stolen data. That was it. He'd crossed the line. I gathered everything: the fake review, the voicemail he left once by accident where he muttered my name, and a screenshot of a burner Twitter account that started following me and some of my coworkers, tweeting vague things about snakes in the tech world. I gave it all to our legal team. They weren't messing around. Within a few days, they got a lawyer involved. A cease and desist letter was sent to Brett's known address. The message was clear: stop or face legal consequences. I didn't hear from him again after that. But I wasn't done yet. After the legal warning, Brett went silent. No more fake accounts. No more messages. It felt like things were finally back to normal. I was doing great at my new job, leading a healthy team, and even getting promoted faster than expected. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just pop up again somewhere else, lying his way into another job, using people's names and stepping on anyone who didn't fall in line. That didn't sit right with me. So I decided to go one step further. I contacted a few old coworkers from different companies Brett had worked at before ours. People who had either quit or been quietly pushed out while he moved up. Turns out, I wasn't the only one he'd pulled this crap on. One woman told me he took credit for a whole project she led, then gave her a terrible performance review that nearly got her fired. Another guy said Brett lied about numbers to a client, then blamed him when the deal fell through. There were patterns. So many of them. And now I had something powerful: witnesses. I gathered statements. Got written messages from people who were willing to speak up. I even found a few internal review scores where Brett had barely passed but somehow still got promoted. With all of this, I went back to the VP at my old company. Not because I wanted revenge for me anymore, but because I saw now how much damage Brett had done to other people. The VP didn't ignore it. In fact, he took it straight to the executive board. Turns out, when Brett was fired, they never added a reason to his employment record. He had quietly moved on without the company officially flagging him. But now, with multiple people giving testimony, and proof that he had tried to damage someone's career post-termination, they took action. They blacklisted him from any of their partner companies. They contacted recruiters and flagged his name internally across 3 different networks. And then, this part shocked even me, they opened an ethics case with the State Business Bureau. Apparently, Brett had signed contracts where he claimed to have credentials and training he never actually earned. They started digging. And what they found? Fake certificates. Online courses he never completed. References that didn't check out. He didn't just lose jobs after that. He lost his career. He was removed from every professional registry he was a part of. No one would hire him. Not even for freelance. Months later, I got an email from someone who used to be close to him. Brett had gone bankrupt. The house, the cars, everything, gone. He'd tried to start a consulting firm using LinkedIn and some phony reviews, but word got around fast. Too many people had heard what he did. Too many receipts had surfaced. No one would trust him. He moved out of Dallas, deleted all his social media, and disappeared. As for me? I stayed quiet about it publicly. Never posted, never bragged. But inside, I knew the truth. I didn't destroy him. He did that to himself. I just gave the truth a place to land. The part that sticks with me the most? A year later, I went back to my old office building to meet a friend for lunch. While I was waiting in the lobby, a new manager walked past with 2 younger employees. One of them asked, "What happened to that guy Brett everyone talks about?" The manager just shook his head and said, "He burned the wrong people." Damn right he did.